This topic has more to do about harmony. Remember back on triads we talked about how to build the first basic building block of chords. That was chords that were built with three notes, stacking thirds, major and minor thirds, and how we would take those three notes and build them on top of each other up the scale, up the major scale. We also learned with triads about the one chord and the two chord and the five chord and so on and so forth, and that there were four basic types of triads: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Now what we're going to do is build chords all the way up to a four-note chord, and these are what we call seventh chords. Let's go ahead and look again at that scale of triads that we had built from before. Here's the C major scale. And if we build a triad on each pitch, we get the scale of triads. And remember how when we built these, we determined that the one chord was major, the two was minor, three is minor, the four is major, five is major, six is minor, and seven was diminished. Now what we're going to do is build a fourth tone on top of each of these. Just going to add the next note up in the major scale for each of these chords, and these are what we call seventh chords. They're called seventh chords because the interval between the lowest pitch to the highest pitch is what we call a seventh. We have a third from the root to the second to the bottom note, a fifth from the root to the second from the top note, and a seventh from the bottom to the top note. So these are called seventh chords. When you listen to these chords, you can hear that there's several different qualities. Some sound happy and stable, some sound happy but yet they seem like they want to move, some seem sad, some seem kind of maybe a little bit unstable. And so we're going to look at the main five different qualities of seventh chords that we see. So let's look at the first main type of seventh chord. If we have a major triad, which is 1, 3, 5 of a major scale, and if we take the seventh note of the major scale and put it on top, we get what's called a major seventh chord. If you see any of the following symbols, large M7, MA7, MAJ7, or a triangle 7, these are all major sevenths. Once again, probably the easiest way to think of a major seventh is it's a major triad with a major seventh on top, or 1, 3, 5, 7 of a major scale. It can be thought of many different ways. A major third, a minor third, and a major third, a major triad with a major seventh on top, a major triad with a major third on top. Lots of different ways, but probably the easiest way is that it's 1, 3, 5, 7 of a major scale. And these are the symbols that you see. Let's try building some major sevenths from some different pitches. Here's that sound of the major seventh. Sort of a happy, stable sound, but a little bit more jazzy than a triad. Let's try building a major seventh from F, from A flat, from D flat, and from E. Okay? And let's try the main way, which is 1, 3, 5, 7 of the major scale. Well, the F major scale would have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, and E. So an F major seventh, first of all, just like with triads, you know they have to be spelled line, 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 or space, 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 space. This is line, 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 so this one's space, 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 space. And as you can see on this chord right here, F, A, C, and E are the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the F major scale. So here we have an F major seventh. Let's go to A flat now. You know that it has to be spelled space, 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 and now we're going to fill in some accidentals. Well, we could build a major triad. A flat, C, and E flat is a major triad, and now we want a major seventh on the outside. So what's the seventh note of the A flat major scale? There it is. A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, and G. Seventh note of the A flat major scale is G. So the top note of our A flat major seventh is a G. Here's another way. A flat triangle 7. That's an A flat major 7th chord. Let's go to D flat now. Let's do this one, 1, 3, 5, 7 of the D flat major scale. Well, you know it has to be space, 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 space. So I'm going to do that first. And then fill in the accidentals from D flat. Well, D flat major has 5 flats. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. We could just go in and insert those accidentals into this chord. Is there an F accidental in D flat? No, that's an F natural. Is there an A accidental in D flat? Yes, when we get to A in D flat, that's a flat. So it would be an A flat. And is there a C accidental in D flat? No. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat, but no C accidental. So here, as it stands right now, is our D flat major 7. And how about an E major 7th? Let's do this one by building an E major triad first. E, G sharp, and B is an E major triad. And then we're going to go up to the 7th. You know, another way to think about that major 7th is the major 7th is always a half step below the root of the chord. So E down a half step is a D sharp, so we're going to stick a D sharp up on top. And that gives you our E major 7th. 4 different ways to write that same chord symbol: large M, triangle, MA, and MAJ. As we've talked about before, if you're looking for a scale to play on a major 7th, the Ionian mode is a good scale to use on a major 7th, but in this unit we're going to talk about one other scale, the Lydian, that possibly could work on this major 7th also. So let's go to the next type of chord. And this is when you have a major triad and you lower the top pitch by a half step. There it is right there. C major triad with a lowered 7th, C, E, G, B flat. This one has a name. It's called a dominant 7th. Dominant 7th has a classical name. First of all, it's called the dominant 7th because we only get this chord when we build the 7th of the scale of 7ths in major. We get that configuration only on the 5th scale degree, and another name for the 5th scale degree is the dominant tone. But another way classical musicians talk about this is by calling it a major minor 7th chord. Major, the first word, stands for what kind of a triad is the basis of this 7th chord. C, E, G is major. The second word, minor, tells you what kind of a 7th it is. And if we have a major 7th, which is from 1 to 7 of a major scale, and lower that 7th by a half step, it's called a minor 7th. So another name for this is a major minor 7th, but the main term that people usually use when they talk about this chord is a dominant 7th. Almost universally, the symbol for a dominant 7th is letter followed by an odd number. Specifically in this case, C7 is a dominant 7th. But later on we'll talk about 9th, 11th, and 13th. Anytime you have a letter, A or E flat, followed by an odd number, 7, 9, 11, or 13, this is what we call a dominant type, major triad with a minor 7th on top. Every once in a great while you might see something like this, the initials DOM, but this doesn't really happen too much. So let's build a dominant 7th chord from a couple of different pitches. Let's try it from G, from B, from D flat, and from F sharp. Okay, well, what we could do is we could take just a couple of ways to put this together. It's a major 7th with a lowered 7th. It's also 1, 3, 5, 7 of a Mixolydian mode. It's another way to think of it. As we know, it's a major triad with a minor 7th. You could also probably think of it in all of its combinations of major and minor thirds, a major third, a minor third, and another minor third. Probably the easiest way is to think of it as a major scale, 1, 3, 5, 7, and lower the 7th. So if we do that from G, a G major 7th would be G, B, D, and F sharp. So if we lower that sharp in F by a half step, we get an F natural, and here's your G dominant 7th chord. Let's go ahead and do it from B also. We know that it has to be spelled BDFA. The first, third, and fifth notes of a B major scale, B, D sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. B, D sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. Remember, in order to make it a dominant seventh chord, though, we're going to lower that top pitch by a half step. So the A sharp comes down and becomes an A natural. And the symbol for that, B7. Let's look at D flat now. Well, we could take a major triad, D flat major. Okay, D flat major triad would be D flat, F, and A flat. And we know we're going to have some kind of C on top. If it were a major seventh, remember, going down a half step from the root gives you the major seventh. So D flat down a half step is C. But with a dominant seventh, we're going to have to lower that major seventh by another half step. So the C needs to come down another half step. But we don't call a C down a half step a B in this case. We have to lower that C to become a C flat. And that gives you a correctly spelled D flat dominant seventh chord. F sharp. Well, let's think about it this way. This is a dominant seventh chord. The dominant seventh chord appears on the fifth scale degree of a key. So F sharp is the fifth scale degree of what major scale? Well, don't go up 5, you're going to go down 5. So F sharp going down 5, F sharp, E, D sharp, C sharp, B. F sharp is the fifth scale degree of the B major scale. So what we could do is put the notes that we know it's going to be here, F sharp, A, C, and E, and we can insert the key signature of B major, and that would give us our F sharp dominant seventh. What kind of accidentals do we see in B major? F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, those 5 sharps. So if we insert any of those accidentals in, we'll get our F sharp dominant seventh. Is there an accidental on A? Yes, remember, in B major we have an A sharp. Is there an accidental on C? Yes, in B major we have a C sharp. And is there an accidental on E? Well, no, in B major we have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, but no accidental on E, so the E stays just as it is. So this would be the correct spelling of an F sharp dominant seventh chord. Here's G7, B7, D flat 7, and F sharp 7. Okay. Remember, this is when we use the Mixolydian mode, is on these dominant seventh chords. Now, let's go to the next type. Next type of seventh chord, and these first 3 are by far the most commonly found seventh chords: major sevenths, minor sevenths, and this next type. This next type of seventh chord, if you were to take a major triad but make it minor, lowering the third by a half step, and then take that seventh and also lower it by a half step, you would get what in classical terms we call a minor seventh chord. The first word is what kind of a triad it is, minor, and the second word is what kind of a seventh it is. C to B flat is a minor seventh. Classical musicians call this one a minor seventh chord. But jazz musicians just call it a minor seventh. Okay? Symbols for minor seventh, there's basically 4. We might see small m, or mi, or min, or the minus sign. These are the 4 most commonly found symbols for a minor seventh chord. Stable but sad sound, and a very frequently found chord, especially in that progression we are going to talk about called the 2-5-1. So let's build a couple other ways to think about it. Remember, major seventh chord, lower the third and the seventh. You would build a minor triad and have a minor seventh on the outside. You could divide it all up into its thirds: minor third, major third, and minor third. It's also 1, 3, 5, 7 of the Dorian scale, or a natural minor scale. So any of those ways are okay to do. So let's try a couple of different minor seventh chords. Let's build one from D. Let's build one from A. How about building one from G sharp? And how about building one from B flat? Okay? So let's try the first way. For a D minor seventh, we're going to build a D major seventh first, and then lower the third and the seventh. Well, this chord has to be spelled space, 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 A D major seventh would have the pitches D, F sharp, A, and C sharp. But remember, with minor seventh, you take a major seventh and lower the third and the seventh, so that C sharp becomes a C, and the F sharp becomes an F natural. That's our D minor seventh chord. A minor seventh. Let's do this one by building a minor triad first and then a minor seventh on the outside. So an A minor triad would be A, C, and D. And a minor seventh would be taking a major seventh and making it smaller by a half step. A major seventh is always found by going a half step below the root. So from A down a half step would be a G sharp. That's a major seventh. So making it a minor seventh would take that G sharp and lower it by another half step, making it a G natural. So A, C, E, and G natural is an A minor seventh. Here we had D minor seventh, and here we've got A minor seventh. G sharp. Well, this is an interesting one. There is no key of G sharp major, so how are we going to do this one? Well, the first thing I know is it's going to have to be space, 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 and space. Excuse me, line, 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 and line in this case. We can think about this. Minor seventh chords show up as a 2 chord in a key. So G sharp is 2 of what key? G sharp is 2 of F sharp major. So if we put in the accidentals from F sharp major, we'll have our G sharp minor seventh chord. Well, that's kind of a tough key. We don't really play an F sharp major that much, but when you look into it, the sharps, or the accidentals, the key signature of F sharp major is 6 sharps. F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, and E sharp. So let's add those accidentals in. Do we have an accidental on B for the key of F sharp major? Well, no, we don't. The B would be left natural. There is no accidental on B in F sharp major. But how about D? Yes, we do have a D sharp in F sharp major. And what about F sharp? Do we have an accidental on F natural? Do we have an accidental on F in the F sharp major scale? Of course we do. We wouldn't have an F natural in F sharp. We'd have an F sharp. So we're going to add a sharp to that F sharp. It's just another way of looking at it. G sharp minor seventh. But really, I think the easiest way would be to take a major scale, 1, 3, 5, 7, and lower the third and the seventh. So with a B flat minor seventh, 1, 3, 5, and 7 are right there. And we're going to lower the third and the seventh, making it a D flat and an A flat. And that gives us our B flat minor seventh. With the 4 possible ways you'll see that chord symbol, small m, mi, minus, and min. Here they all are: D minor seventh, A minor seventh, G sharp minor seventh, and B flat minor seventh. Now, by far, those are the most commonly found seventh chords: major sevenths, minor sevenths, and dominant sevenths. Now, there are 2 more that are also very frequently found. In fact, there's more than 2. Maybe we'll review a few of those. But those are the most common 3. Let's look at probably the next most common one. This one is where we take a diminished triad and put a minor seventh on top. So a diminished triad, remember, we take a major triad and lower the third and the fifth, and that makes it diminished. And then we have a minor seventh on top. We can remember from both the dominant and the minor seventh that a minor seventh from C is B flat. So here we have this chord, which has a nickname, which is called diminished minor. A diminished minor seventh. This is what a classical musician would call this chord. Diminished on the bottom and a minor seventh on the top. But jazz musicians would call this chord a half diminished chord. Half diminished, so called because half of the chord is diminished and half of it is not diminished. Okay? All right, so chord symbols for this half diminished, there's several. We could have C with a null set sign 7. That's by far the most frequently found chord symbol for a half diminished chord. But some other ones would be anything designating that it's a minor seventh with a lowered fifth. So we might see C minor 7 flat 5 or minus 5, C mi 7 flat 5, C min 7 minus 5. Anything saying that it's a minor seventh chord and lower the fifth. Let's try building this half diminished chord from some different pitches. How about from E, from G, from A, and from B? Okay. Maybe the easiest way is to take a major seventh and lower the top three notes. So in E major seventh chord, 1, 3, 5, 7 of the E major scale would be E, G sharp, B, and D sharp. So if you're going to lower these top three pitches by a half step, the G sharp is going to become a G natural, the D sharp is going to become a D natural, and that B is going to become a B flat, and here is your E half diminished seventh chord. Let's do the same thing with the next one. G, well, let's build a G major seventh first. 1, 3, 5, 7 of the G major scale would be G, B, D, and F sharp. So if we lower the top three pitches by a half step, we'll get a G half diminished. The F sharp would become a F natural. The D would become a D flat, and the B would become a B flat, and here you have your G half diminished seventh chord. A. How about doing it this way? Let's take a minor seventh chord and lower the fifth by a half step. Well, A minor seventh is one of your easier sevenths. It appears in the scale of sevenths in major. It's all white notes, A, C, E, and G. There's your minor seventh chord. So if we were to lower that fifth by a half step, remember, that's the difference between a minor seventh and a half diminished. It's got a lowered fifth. So if we were to take that fifth and lower it by a half step, we would get A, C, E flat, and G. A half diminished. And how about from B? Well, let's build a B major seventh chord. Okay, we know it has to be spelled B, D, F, and A. And the first, third, fifth, and seventh note of the B major scale are D sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. So if we lower those top three pitches by a half step, you're going to take all the sharps away. So we'd end up getting B, D, F, and A, all naturals. This is the only half diminished seventh chord that's all naturals. And that we would get B minor seventh flat 5. You can see I've put a variety of different ways you might see this chord symbol. The null set sign, minor 7 minus 5, M7 flat 5, and MIN 7 minus 5. Any of those will work for a half diminished seventh chord. There's one more basic way to build a seventh chord. There's 5 basic seventh chords. So let's look at the last one. The last seventh chord we see pretty frequently has a nickname in classical music, and it's called diminished. Diminished. It's called diminished because it's a diminished triad with a diminished seventh. Well, in classical music theory, a diminished seventh is taking a minor seventh and making it smaller by a half step. So right now, from the C to the B flat, we have a minor seventh. So if we're going to make that space smaller by a half step, we'd have to call this not an A, but a B double flat. So here's your correctly spelled diminished seventh chord from C. No jazz musician really calls these diminished. They have a couple of other names. They either call it a fully diminished seventh chord, or quite frequently just a diminished seventh chord. And here's the sound. It has kind of that sound of the train coming that's just about to run over the fair maiden on the railroad tracks. Okay, so we have our fully diminished seventh chord there. A couple other ways to think of it. Major seventh with a lowered third, lowered fifth, and doubly lowered seventh. It's also 1, 3, 5, and 7 of a diminished scale. It's also a half diminished chord with a lowered seventh. Lots of ways to think about the fully diminished seventh chord. Here's the symbols that we'll see quite frequently. Most of the time you see circle, C circle 7. We sometimes might see the word dim, C dim 7. Either of those are the most commonly found symbols for a fully diminished chord. Let's build this from a couple of different pitches. How about E? How about A sharp? That'll be a fun one. How about C sharp? And then how about something like G? All right. Another way to think about this chord is it's all stacked minor thirds. A step and a half from C to E flat, step and a half from E flat to G flat, and a step and a half from G flat to B double flat. Any way you look at it, though, these chords must be spelled line, 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 or space, 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 space. We just need to fill in the accidentals. So with E, we could take a half diminished seventh chord and lower the fifth, lower the seventh. Let's see. How about building a major seventh chord, lowering the third and the fifth, and doubly lowering the seventh? Well, an E major seventh chord would be E, G sharp, B, and D sharp. So if we're going to lower that fifth, it would be a G. Lower the third, it would be a G. Lower the fifth, it would be a B flat. But doubly lower this D sharp. Okay, well, D sharp lowered by a half step is D. D sharp lowered by another half step would be D flat. And here you have your correctly spelled E diminished seventh chord. How about A sharp? This is a tough one. Okay, well, we could just do the step and a half idea. So between each of these pitches, we've got a step and a half. Well, a step and a half from A sharp would be what kind of a C? A C sharp. And a step and a half from a C sharp would be an E. And a step and a half from an E would be a G. So here we have our correctly spelled A sharp diminished seventh. C sharp, another tough one. Maybe we should do that one the same way. Step and a half from C sharp, E. Okay. Step and a half from E would be G. Okay, good. And a step and a half from G would be a B flat. So that's our correctly spelled C sharp diminished seventh chord. How about for this last one, we do it building a major scale and then lowering as we need. So a G major seventh would be G, B, D, and F sharp. Remember to take a major seventh chord and make it diminished. We're going to lower that third by a half step, lower the fifth by a half step, and lower the seventh by 2 half steps. So an F sharp lowered by a half step is F, and F lowered by a half step is an F flat. So here's our correctly spelled G fully diminished seventh chord. And that gets you to your 5 main types of seventh chords. Major sevenths, also known as major major sevenths. That's triangle and large M and MAJ. Dominant seventh, letter followed by odd number, C7. That's like the first 1, 3, 5, 7 of a Mixolydian mode, a dominant seventh. The minor seventh, C small m7, C min7. It's like a major seventh with a lowered third and a lowered fifth. Half diminished, like a minor seventh with a lowered fifth, or a major seventh with a lowered third, fifth, and seventh. And fully diminished, this one here, which is all stacked minor thirds, or a major seventh with a lowered third, fifth, and seventh, with the seventh lowered twice, also called diminished diminished. Those are the 5 main types. Every once in a while we see other types of seventh chords, and really what we've talked about here with these seventh chords is a variety of stacked thirds, taking major thirds and minor thirds and stacking them in a variety of different ways. Well, not all seventh chords are like this. Let's take a couple of other possibilities here. Here's one right here. This one here is an augmented triad with a major seventh on top. This one's called augmented major. Chord symbol for this, you might see C major 7 plus, or C major 7 sharp 5. It's called augmented major. How about this one? This one would be a dominant seventh with a lowered fifth. This shows up every once in a while. This one doesn't really have a name because it's not really a triad with a seventh. C, E, and G flat does not make a triad, but the chord symbol for this we might see C7 flat 5. It shows up pretty frequently. Another interesting one here, a diminished triad with a major seventh. This would be called diminished major. Chord symbol for this one, well, you just kind of do what it says. We want a symbol for a diminished triad, and we want a symbol for a major seventh. So we might see something like C circle MAJ7. Okay. This is kind of a funny sounding chord when you first hear it. However, when you get used to the sound, you actually hear it somewhat. Here's the first original first chord from a tune called Stella by Starlight. This first chord is diminished major. Also, the first beginning part of Unforgettable. That chord right there, diminished major. Some other possibilities. Let's see. We could also have a dominant seventh chord with a raised fifth. Augmented minor, augmented triad with a minor seventh. It's another possibility for a seventh chord. Sometimes you'll see it like that, C plus 7. Okay, but these are kind of specialty chords. They don't show up as much as the other ones. The main five you got to be aware of are major sevenths, dominant sevenths, minor sevenths, half diminished, and fully diminished. The last thing for what we're going to do today is look at the scale of sevenths. Now, we talked about the scale of triads. And at the beginning of this lesson, we put all the sevenths on the board, what they would look like. So let's determine what kinds of seventh chords are the most frequently found seventh chords in the key of C. Well, C, E, G, B, that's 1, 3, 5, 7 of a major scale. So we know that one is a major seventh. And that would get the Roman numeral 1, 7. D, F, A, C. Well, you can see on the bottom it's a minor triad, and on top it's a minor seventh. Minor, minor seventh chord. So that would be a D minor seventh. And that would get the Roman numeral small 2, 7. This is where we're going to use our Dorian mode, if you remember. The third one, E, G, B, D. Minor triad on the bottom, E, G, B, with a minor seventh on the outside. Minor, minor seventh, also known as a minor seventh, E minor seventh, gets the Roman numeral 3, 7. The next one has that happy stable sound, F, A, C, and E, 1, 3, 5, 7 of the F major scale. This one would be an F major 7, gets the Roman numeral 4, 7. And this is where we're going to find out we use the Lydian mode on this major seventh as opposed to Ionian. This one we talked about even as far back as the triad. Here's our dominant seventh. This is the only case here where we have a major triad with a minor seventh. And the name of this scale degree is called the dominant scale degree. So here on the fifth scale degree we have a G7. Gets the Roman numeral 5, 7. And remember, this is where we decided that we're going to use the Mixolydian scale. Okay, the sixth chord, A, C, E, and G. Okay, minor triad with a minor seventh on top. Minor, minor, otherwise known as a minor seventh. So this is a minor seventh and gets the Roman numeral 6 with a 7 after it. We'll find out that whereas before we would have used Dorian every time we see a minor seventh chord, we'll find out here we start using Aeolian. If the chord is behaving like a sixth chord, we would choose the Aeolian mode to create our melodies. And the last one up there, there's that unusual unstable sound, a B diminished triad with a minor seventh on the top. Remember, this is diminished minor. This is the one that we call half diminished. This is the only time the half diminished chord shows up in the scale of sevenths. It's on the seventh scale degree. And that gets the Roman numeral small 7 with that null set sign and then a 7 after it. You can see in the scale of sevenths, we actually never naturally see a fully diminished seventh chord. Those show up in minor keys, and later on we'll see how you actually could use a diminished chord in a major key, but it just doesn't naturally appear in the scale of sevenths. And that's the end of our lecture for seventh chords today.